click record. So we have that running. And have a bit of water myself.
One more quick swig of Starbucks. my latest addiction.
Oh, yeah? We don't have much in Australia. Like I know around the world when I travel, it's around everywhere. Or Melbourne in particular doesn't have much Starbucks because we have so many local coffee shops. And Melbourne's known for
That's
coffee.
awesome.
Yeah, so we always have
That's
little,
nice.
cool little places, which is...
I would much prefer that. That's so neat.
Yeah, it's really neat. Like Melbourne's got like, if you want to go on like a coffee tour, there's like, you won't be able to get through them. Like you have to go.
Wow.
It's like, it will take you weeks and weeks and weeks because it's
wow.
So much.
That's cool.
Good quality coffee there. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So when you give me the thumbs up, I'll get started. Beautiful. Hello and welcome. My name is Tiffany Farag and welcome to Get to Know You, a podcast for those who want to open conversations and access deeper dialogue, where conversations can become stronger when we explore our thinking and behavior. Every Tuesday, a new question will be asked to a guest speaker. Genuine people here to have insightful conversations. My guest speaker today is from Dallas, Texas. He is the author of The School of Intentional Living and the founder of Intentional Living Academy. With a passion for helping others, his journey began when he found himself bankrupt at the age of 28 after following conventional wisdom all his life. This eye-opening moment taught him that attaining true happiness and fulfillment means breaking free from conventional living and creating your own path. Now he hopes to inspire and empower his readers to achieve their dreams and live their lives they truly deserve. Welcoming Sean Rosensteel to Get to Know You. Welcome, Sean.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is fun.
So much fun. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. So I'd really love for the listeners to hear about your book and your academy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had a really good time writing the book. Well, some parts of it, I was having a good time. Other parts of it, I struggled. But let's see, I started writing it back in February and it published in July. So it's been out for maybe 2.5 months or so. I feel really blessed as far as the results are concerned. I was very excited that it sold quite a few thousand copies already. I'm a self-published author. So at the beginning of the year, I had an intention to write a book for about 5 years. At the beginning of the year, I wasn't sure where I'd begin. I just knew I had to get my butt in the seat and start writing, and I'd worry about the marketing later. But what a cool experience. If anyone out there is considering putting some words on paper and taking the time to clarify and organize their thoughts, it was just such an awesome experience. And it's that much better when you get the validation from sales and you hear feedback from readers. And it's interesting because we all read and listen to things and even watch movies autobiographically. So what I found so fascinating was I would hear about certain things that really resonated and affected people in a deep way. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that paragraph even mattered. It almost got cut, So you never know what you don't know until you release your work. And what a just really neat and fulfilling experience that was this year. But yeah, I'm an avid reader myself. You and I talked about that when we chatted a few weeks ago. And I've always admired authors for not only their ability to clarify their thoughts in the written word, but their courage to expose themselves to public criticism. I remember the moment I sent out my advanced reader campaign, I had maybe 125 people on my list that were friends and family, and no one else had written or had read this book except for my 2 editors. And I remember pushing send on that campaign with the ability to download the PDF to read an advanced copy. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. And what's this person going to think? And, oh, I told that story. I've never shared this with anybody. And what's my dad going to think? He's going to flip out. I grew up in a very private house. We valued privacy very highly. So my parents are very private people, and I used to be very private. I still am to a certain extent, but I certainly shared a lot of my story in the beginning just to let the reader know that, look, I'm not perfect. I've been obsessed with this topic of intentional living for a decade because I was living so unintentionally 10 years ago until I had my little wake-up call. And I just wanted to share this real-world approach that I discovered, and that's helped so many others, and in the hopes it will help you. But it was really neat, Tiffany. I don't know, probably 3 or 4 hours. You know, the book is short. It's about,
Yeah.
125 pages if you remove the front and the back matter. So it's a quick read, which was by design. And my dad texted me probably 3 or 4 hours after I sent that email. And of course, my brain's still asking me all the wrong questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's everyone's going to think of it? And oh my gosh, what have I done? The cat's out of the bag, And he texted me and he said something like, call me about your book, period. And I'm just like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah.
And it was just a really awesome phone call. We talked for about a half hour. He read it. Within. He's a crazy reader. This guy reads more books than probably anyone I know. And he read it within like 2 hours of me sending it on his computer. It was a PDF at that point. It hadn't been printed yet in a physical copy. And he just like sang the book's praises for like a half hour. And it was just the coolest.
That's fantastic.
Oh, it was such a neat conversation. It was so rewarding. And it was such a neat, like attaboy kind of a experience for me.
Yeah.
So I knew when he gave me that validation that it was going to do some good things and that, I didn't make a huge mistake. So again, anyone out there thinking of writing a book, I can't encourage you enough. It's very challenging. You are going to struggle. You're going to get stuck. You're going to get feedback from people who aren't your ideal readers that tell you it's worthless, but keep going. It's so worthwhile. And it's really neat. I remember the first time I sent the rough draft, my first initial copy to my editor, the first time anyone else was reading my words. I was driving home that day and I was on the phone with my wife and I was like, I could get hit by a bus today. And like, it's out there. Like someone else has my work and they can fix it up and they can release it into the world. It was just such a neat, proud feeling. And this intentional living topic is such a broad, hairy, scary topic. I think there's a lot of confusion, some misconceptions behind it. And I really focused on writing this book for my children. Like my future children, I have 3 kids, 7 and under. And I thought, if they were ever in a place in life where they felt like they were lost or going through the motions or really struggling with an addiction or whatever it was, like I really wanted to provide them with the same map that helped me get out of the woods 10 years ago. So that was really my focus. That's what kept me going, is that one day I could maybe help out one of my kids in the event that they were stuck. So that really helped me going. And it's just a neat feeling when someone else has your work, for the first time. And it's scary, but at the same time, it's almost liberating because you're like, wow, I did it, Yeah,
absolutely. Why did you call it the School of Intentional Living? Why school? Because that's so different.
Yeah, it is a little different. Well, the title Intentional Living, one of my many mentors, John C. Maxwell, already took that title many years ago, and he published his book. And while I still probably could use that, I was told by one of my writing coaches not to do that because someone might search for his book, see your book, buy yours, get it in the mail, and be really disappointed. Like, hey, this isn't Maxwell's book. Who is this guy? What is this one? So I didn't want to copy verbatim, but I still wanted intentional living in the title. That was very important for me because I think a lot of people, when I talk about intentional living, it's neat because like 9 out of 10 people are like, oh, that's kind of cool. But there's always like that one person who's like, oh, wow, I want to live more intentionally. I was just talking to my partner about this, or my spouse about this, or my kids about this. So it really resonates with certain people, but at the same time, it repels a lot of people too. So I don't mind that. It's kind of black and white. But I chose the school because looking back on my experience with formal education, I did not have a very good experience. I was a very poor student. I think in the book, I said I was a C average student, and that's being very generous. I was probably a D+, C-, average student. And for me, school was just, I was putting in my time. I would learn something I had no interest in. I would regurgitate whatever it was I learned on a test, and then I would kind of forget about it. And that really formed a habit. And by the time I was beyond school and I entered the real world, I really had this C average identity. I made a lot of C average decisions that eventually led to my bankruptcy in my late 20s, which was 30 days before my wedding date. So that was a very interesting period in my life. And what I realized was, looking back, I learned some very valuable lessons. In fact, an idea hit me late last year. I struggled, Tiffany, for years. I wanted to write a book. I've been coaching intentional living to a lot of individuals, groups for the last probably 6 years now. And it was recommended, hey, you need to write a book on this framework, on this approach of yours. It's so neat. It's so unique. It's so relatable. And when I was coaching it, I didn't have this school metaphor yet. I wasn't quite there. And late last year, this idea hit me. And I said, my entire approach was influenced heavily by my time in school, which didn't sit well with me because I'm like, oh, I hated school. That did nothing for me, but I had to give, after thinking through it, I had to give credit where credit was due. And I'm like, wow, I could really write a book that I believe would be highly relevant, especially right now in the midst of this pandemic. I think a lot of people are using this time as their wake-up call. They're sitting back, they're pausing, they're reflecting and saying, wait, where have I been? Where am I today? Is this where I want to be in my life? And where am I looking to go tomorrow? So I know it's a relevant subject matter, but I wanted to make sure I created that relatability factor. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to try to force someone into a framework that they didn't relate to. So I figured, if I could write about our collective experiences in school and say, hey, you remember back in school, there was this thing. Remember you had these things in school. Well,
like you mentioned in your book, homework. I like how you've related to all our priorities and our homework.
Our homework. Yeah. And like subject areas, we had different subject areas, math, science, language. And we couldn't get, like, let's say we had 6 subject areas back in school. We couldn't pass 5 subject areas, but fail one of them. We wouldn't advance to the next grade. We couldn't, pass with flying colors in one and flunk out of all the other 5. We wouldn't advance to the next grade. So I say, look, in the real world, we have areas of our lives. We have life areas. We have at a very high level, our health, our wealth, our relationships. And there are a bunch of sub areas beneath there. That's simplified, but we have these things and we need to be in this constant state of balancing. Somehow we figured it out back in school. Many of us did, some of us didn't. But in the real world, the stakes are much higher. We won't fail a class, or we won't not advance, or we won't be just held back. We could have a major health catastrophe over the next 10 years if all we do is focus on our career. Or we could have a major issue with our relationship, if all we do is spend all of our time, focus, and energy in this other area. So we need to be in this constant state of balancing, and we need awareness for what these subject areas are. We need awareness for what these life areas are. Back in school, we were told what those were. They're like, hey, look, here's the curriculum. Here are your 6 targets, and this is what you need to pay attention to and continually improve over time to get to the next grade. Well, in the real world, that's on us. Like, we have to discover what that is for us. I remember years ago, I took quite a few personal development programs that were like, here are the 7 areas. And I'd be like, well, that's great that you think that's important, but I have different areas in my life that I feel are important. And there was a conflict there. So
can you give me an example of that? Because I'm quite curious as to what you made me think. It's like, okay, well, what priorities or areas that I think, are subjects in my life that I think need balancing. Someone else. What's an example for you that why wasn't that something?
Yes. So this is the first chapter in the book, right? So it's like if you have this health, this primary area of health, you might have spiritual or religious health, you might have mental or emotional health, you might have physical health. It's up to you based on your unique circumstances, your stage in life, what matters. You get to decide. No one else should decide that for you. You should decide that. Then in your wealth area, you might have your career, or maybe you have a business, you might have retirement, budget, finance, whatever that looks like, maybe some philanthropical work you do, some charitable things. Then in your relationships, you might have a spouse, significant other, partner, you might have children,
Your parents.
family, aging parents. You might
Yeah,
have
that's it.
communities.
So more like sub subjects that you mean. So
Sub
like there's
areas, exactly.
the broad areas are all the same. Like there's about 10 or 12, depending on what you're reading, areas that we all have. And then it's just like, okay, well, what specifically in that area is the priority for you?
Yes. Yep. And I studied a lot of adult learning theory, over the last decade. And one of the things I want to do with this book and in my academy is I wanted to make sure it was relevant for the reader. So I'm not trying to write as from the standpoint of an expert. I am not an expert in anyone else's life. I think we all need to be an expert in our own life. That's our responsibility. But you need to be an expert in yours. So I did my best to be the guide to say, look, here's the menu, but it doesn't just stop there. This is up to you, right? So to answer your question from a moment ago, years ago, I took a program that had spirituality as one of the main 7 areas. This person was like, here's the 7 areas, one of which is spirituality. And this person was telling me that that's the most important thing. And in the book, as you know, because I know you're up to chapter 4 or whatever it is, I know that part of this, there's assignments at the end of every chapter.
Yes.
And part of it is once you've identified, now you prioritize them. But that order is up to you. And I share what I've done, but that doesn't mean that's the right way for you to go about it. But I encourage people to put these in the appropriate order, because it's like one of those rising tide lifts all boats types of things, right?
Yeah.
So this area of spirituality was, back then I wasn't into spirituality. I had just some negative experiences with religion growing up. And I really turned that entire part of my life off and completely disconnected from my higher power, God, universal intelligence source, whatever it is we call it. That was not a priority in my life for many years. So when I was in this program, I'm like, this isn't relevant. And there was that conflict, because there was a lot of information about spirituality and I was being told how much I should value it. But I'm like, I'm not in a place in life right now where that's a priority or that's something I value. And I just felt like this disconnect with the program and there was a conflict. And after 6 months or so, I think I wasted a lot of time trying to figure it out, how to implement this. But I'm like, you know what? This is irrelevant for me now. And this isn't the right fit for me now. And I didn't want that to happen with my reader. I don't want that to happen with my students. So I want to do my best to kind of guide them through to discover what matters to them based on their unique situation. There's been a handful of people in my life who have acted as true guides. Like their only agenda was to help me achieve mine. So I really wanted to pay that forward and be that author, hopefully, who could help the reader discover their own answers and their own truths. So now in my life, spirituality is number one, for me.
Yes.
I find that if I can take care of that, especially early in the morning and sometime even like midday and even in the evening, like the more I'm tapped into the mainframe in my own life, the more calm I am, the more collected that I am, the more peaceful I am, the more I can serve at my best level every day. So now where I've arrived today, spirituality happens to be a big priority. I value it very highly, but I wasn't in a place back then when I was trying out some personal development programs.
Yes.
So it's just, unfortunately, that wasn't a good time.
No, I was colliding with you. I understand what you mean and can relate in so many ways. And I'm just curious, when you talk about spirituality and finding that and making time for that, is that, because I know for me, it's when I do my meditation. Is that the kind of the path that you take to be in touch with that?
Yeah, for me, and I almost don't like talking about meditation because, some people are instantly turned off by it. Right.
That's right. It depends on who. Yeah, exactly. But
I'd
we
rather
all
talk
use
about
it in different ways.
We all use it in different ways. I'd almost rather talk about like vehicles,
Yeah, exactly. It's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle. So I used to use, like, in order for me to calm my mind, to soothe my nerves, to cure my boredom, my vehicle was alcohol. That was my vehicle of choice. But when I used that vehicle, I lost a lot of, I burned a lot of bridges. I felt a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. I woke up the next day feeling awful. I was taken off for 72 hours with a hangover. It wasn't a very empowering, mobilizing, healthy vehicle for me. So yes, I like to use meditation because it centers me. It gives me a lot of the things that I was looking for by using tobacco or alcohol or some external substance in the past. And it really enables me to live a better life. So yes, one of my vehicles is meditation. I'll also just take a walk out in nature, leave my phone behind, leave technology behind, and just go be present for 20, 30 minutes as I walk. And I like taking walks at night and kind of just looking up at the sky. And I'm starting to learn astronomy a little bit and starting to recognize some stars and some constellations. So anything that makes you feel connected, right?
Yeah.
So
and
it doesn't
calm
have to.
and peaceful and just, I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Content. Yep.
Exactly. That's it. And so, listeners, the main question that we're going to be diving into, which Sean actually brought to my attention, and you have this at the start of your book and I'd like you to go into it as well, is what if my whole life has been wrong? So how was this question brought to your attention? And what was the first thing that came to your mind when you saw this question?
Yeah, so I am one of those weird people who live with the end in mind, and I have to constantly remind myself of that. I guess you could say I have like that mortality motivation, because for the first 3 decades of my life, I felt like I was bulletproof. I felt like I was immortal, like I was unstoppable, like, nothing would get in my way, nothing would hurt me. I'll live forever. I read many years ago, I read the top 5 regrets of the dying by Bronnie Ware. And she was a palliative care nurse, and she worked with her patients, cared deeply for her patients in the final weeks of their lives. And after hundreds of conversations, she started to recognize some patterns and trends. And she, in her book, reports that the number one regret of the dying is that I wish I would have lived a life true to myself and not the life others expect of me. So that, for me, was profound. And I don't remember which came first, but during that same period, I read The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And towards the end of his life, I think it was a helper who was near his deathbed. But as he was beginning to die or to pass or to transition, he said to this other person, he wondered, what if my whole life was wrong? And I don't think I connected the dots when I went bankrupt, but that's how I was feeling back then. 10 years ago, I felt like a complete other failure. And financial bankruptcy shook me up because I had my whole identity wrapped up in this idea of conventional success. A mansion, fast cars, fancy toys, status, keeping up with the Joneses. I was filling my life up with all of these material possessions. And I actually didn't hit my goal of being this millionaire by the time I was 25. And so I decided to make some very negligent, poor decisions to accelerate my wealth before I hit 30. And those decisions, they involved real estate. I went in way over my skis. And in the '08 collapse, like so many of us were affected by, I couldn't recover from it. So I filed bankruptcy a month before my wedding. And I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be responsible for another human being like real soon. And this other human being is talking about her dream of one day starting a family. And how am I going to be responsible for another human being and maybe a family when I can't even take responsibility for my own life? I recognized that financial bankruptcy, Tiffany, was like the least of my concerns. I was physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally bankrupt. I had to press the reset button in every area of my life. But I realized that while I could press a reset button in the financial column, I couldn't just press a reset button for these other areas. I had to get to work.
Yeah.
And I had to start taking my life a little bit more seriously. I had to get my act together. So when I finalized the paperwork, my attorney was like, are there any other debts you didn't disclose? Like, we've got to strengthen your case, disclose everything, full transparency. And I said, well, there's one thing I didn't tell you. And I borrowed some money shortly after school when I entered the real world from my folks, but I don't want to disclose that debt. I do intend on paying them back someday. And he's like, well, you should do, he encouraged me to do it. I said, yes. And then moments later, I'm sitting in my car and I'm having this realization that my poor mother is going to, in a few weeks or months, whenever the paperwork goes out, is going to walk to the mailbox, open up a letter from the government, and realized that her son had, flushed the money that she and my dad had lent to him in a court of law. And I just couldn't, I felt like a massive failure. My parents gave me their unconditional love. I was so fortunate. Their whole life, they just loved me unconditionally, supported me in every which way they could. And I felt like a failure. So I made a phone call. I figured I better call them and give them a heads up. I delivered the news. There was silence for a little while, but my dad finally said, Sean, no one is responsible for you but you. And then my mom chimed in with, it's time to find a quiet place and figure things out. Now, these are two things that my mom and dad had told me for many, many years, in my teenage years, throughout my 20s. I didn't have the readiness. I wasn't ready. I don't think I was in enough pain to take that guidance seriously. And now I was desperate. Now my back was against the wall. I had this wedding in 30 days. And I knew I needed to make that decision and dig out of this hole. So when I read those words, what if my whole life has been wrong? I didn't articulate it in a thought pattern at the time, but they just resonated with me because I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I was thinking back then. I was a hot mess. I was addicted. I was abusing alcohol. I was just, my life was upside down.
Sure.
And I was feeling that way. So that resonated with me. It's how I open up my book. I open a lot of my talks that way, because when and if someone is in a place in their life where they're looking to recalibrate a bit, looking to reset, looking to change some behaviors, looking to go in a different direction, whether it's the relationship or career, start a business, forgive someone. It's like when you hear those
it's
words,
applicable in so many ways. Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
When you were talking earlier and you were mentioning the palliative nurse, as you know, like I'm a podiatrist and a lot of my patients are the elderly. So that was the number one thing. Exactly. Like they were always saying the number one regret is everything. Like I didn't do what I wanted to do. They regret what they didn't do. I should have lived what I wanted to do instead of trying to please other people. Or it was that is the number one regret. And I've seen hundreds and hundreds of the elderly, and that's the number one thing. Why, I should have done what I wanted to do. I should have done what made me happy.
Yeah, that breaks my heart.
Yeah,
that's hard for me to hear. I mean, and I know that's going on. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons I wanted to write my book is like, I was never taught this stuff. I had a lot of positive influence in my life from religion and from society, culture, formal education system, but no one ever taught me how to define what it was I wanted to make of my life, and then how to take action and go forward and make it my reality. There was always an agenda for whatever reason, but again, there was a handful of people I can count them on less than, 5 fingers that really helped me. They asked me the right questions, and they helped me get clear on what it was I wanted, or what it was I was feeling, or whatever it was. And they did it in a very unbiased way. So it's one of the reasons I thought I needed to write this book, was because I think I'm not the only one who has experienced this, and I still experience it today. Yeah, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm done.
It's gone. It's finished. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Life is an ongoing thing. It's not like you're done with it. You're not done until you're done. But yeah. And I believe I've come to the realization that I believe that in our final moments, many of us, if you're anything like me, will wonder if you passed or failed at this beautiful thing we all call life. And
can you though pass or fail?
I believe that a lot of us might ask that question.
Yeah. Or what is, and with even this question, what is wrong? It's like, what if my whole life has been wrong, but what is considered wrong? What is your wrong?
Well, obviously, if someone's asking, if Ivan Ilyich was asking that question, there was something. Who am I to say what's wrong about your life or his life or his?
That's right.
We all have to decide that for ourselves. But for him, there was a lot of things. I think he just kind of went through the motions with his work, and I think that he kind of let his wife just kind of steer him and dictate. He just always wanted to kind of keep her happy, and so he did have some regret. I want to have minimal regrets, at the end. I don't want to, I want to live in a way that is aligned with my own values. I want to live in a way that hopefully serves others. I want to live in a way that I can feel really satisfied and fulfilled with when I reach my own final moments.
Yeah.
So I'm not, who am I to say what's right or wrong?
But what was wrong? What was wrong for yourself?
Gosh, back then, everything.
Everything.
So I was, going out. First of all, I was pursuing all sorts of material possessions, like the dollar signs.
Sure.
The dollar signs.
What about now? Like when you're talking about now and you're saying, I still have to look back and go, oh, it's always not perfect all the time. Do you have like things that you think, oh, maybe this was wrong for the last week you did something? It's like, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Now they're a little bit more, they're more manageable now. So they're actually quite small. So for example, I'm an entrepreneur. It's very easy for me to get soaked up in work and spend 98% of my time in work mode. And, while I'm home physically, I may not be home mentally with my wife, with my children. And, I just got done with a 5-day intentional living challenge.
Yes.
And it consumed a ton. I mean, like my screen time, after the last week, like I can't tell you how much I was involved with Facebook over the last week with this campaign. So for me, it's a constant state of balancing, as I mentioned. I don't think balance is a destination. I don't think we should look at, we talk about work-life balance. I think a lot of people look at that as balance as a noun, but I look at it as balance as a verb. I want to be in a constant state of course correcting, constant state of balancing so that I don't miss something and then come up 10 years later. I'm like, oh my gosh, this area is on fire. And had I just paid a little bit more attention proactively, I could have course corrected that a lot sooner. So for me, a lot of the things right now, frankly, have to do with my own family. So here we are, like so many of us, all of us in the midst of this pandemic. We've got virtual school going on. I've got a wife whose dream was to be a stay-at-home mom. And thanks to, all of her efforts in our businesses over the past 10 years, she was able to make that happen 7 years ago with the birth of our first son. And now she's taken on the role of a teacher and disciplinarian and all these other things she's not used to in Zoom IT tech department. And, like teachers are, teachers all of a sudden are, we're all just playing some different roles, wearing some different hats. So for me, I've been buried with this, I've been busy with the book, writing, editing, designing, publishing, marketing. I've been busy with the third version of my Intentional Living Academy. I've been busy running these challenges every month. And for me, it's like, I need to constantly make sure that I am allocating enough time with my family, that I am paying enough attention to my wife, who is my business partner, my life partner, who I want to know is supported and deeply loved. Like that takes a lot of effort. And I want to, I want my kids to know that when I'm with them physically, I'm with them mentally. I'm there with them. I'm present with them. So that to me is, and I feel so blessed to say this right now, is one of my focus areas as we close out 2020 is like, I want to make sure that I'm investing my time in the right places. So luckily it's not a health issue currently that I'm paying attention to. It might be next year. I'm about 8. My son, Tiffany, went in to get one of his dentist, his appointments done a few weeks ago, and there was a scale and they weighed him in. I'm like, well, what the heck? I'll go on the scale. So I'm 8 pounds overweight. It is what it is. I got a little bit of a, pandemic belly, I guess, as you would call it.
Yeah.
I think quarantine 19, I've been hearing that phrase getting like the freshman 5 or whatever that was, hearing that being thrown around. But, my health habits have gotten a little bit out of whack this year. I'm very aware of it. I'm probably not going to do anything about it this year, but I am very aware that next year in 2021, I'll have to focus in on my health a little bit. I'll have to change up my exercise routine a little bit. I'll have to change up my habits for eating. I'll have to eat a little more healthy for, a certain period of time. So I just want that awareness. I just want that awareness. It's so important that I have awareness in my life so that my life doesn't get too far off the tracks where I can't redirect it.
Yeah. So yeah. So basically, like when you look at this question, you're looking at the balancing out those different aspects that we are talking about earlier, and that's when you're like, if you're able to keep them in balance, that's you. That's your life not being wrong per se. But would you say though, like when I think about this question, I look at maybe there are wrong parts in my life, but then I've improved. But then these wrong parts in my life will come in intermittently into my life again until I'm no longer living. I don't think you can always live a you're not going to always live a life that's in all aspects of it are balanced, are where you want them to be, are how you see them, how you envision them. So it'll be like intermittent wrong living. Would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Intermittent wrong living. I agree with you. There are seasons, right? There are seasons for everything. The only constant is change. So I look at my life as, like I might look at investing. Some of the greatest investors in the world are like, hey, one simple rule, make sure you have more good days than bad. And there will be bad days. There will be things that, we struggle with, that we suffer through. We can't control so many things. I think a lot of us think we can control more than we can, but you get to a certain point of acceptance or surrender maybe, and you realize just how out of control you really are. But there's a certain peace with that feeling when you can let go and detach from some of these outcomes. So I agree with what you're saying. For me, it's like, I want to make sure that throughout the week, I have more good days than bad days. For every month, I want to make sure I'm just up a little bit on my good days than the bad. And if I can just sustain that and have more good days than bad throughout the years and decades in my life, I think I'll be very satisfied and be feeling very grateful and very blessed. Right.
Yeah.
So when you say like those things that are intermittent, like give me an example. Like, what are you referring to?
Like, I guess it's like, I don't know if you can, okay, I've got my health up, my relationships with my family are up, maybe my emotional well-being or intelligence or whatever, my mental is up, and oh, my career's a bit low. Okay, I'm going to put my focus a bit on my career. Oh no, like my relationships are kind of dying down a bit. Like, it's like, I don't know if it is possible to keep everything up and balanced. All these 10 or 12, depending on what you're looking at, all balanced, even not just balanced, even just not just doing well, just even at a good place.
I'm
There's
telling
always
you, it's
one that's
not
going to dip
possible.
down. Yeah. So
It's
it's
not
just like,
possible.
yeah, you
Yeah,
have to
it's a
keep that the
myth.
other one. That's right.
It's a myth. It's a misconception. And if that's your expectation, if your expectation is like, oh, I need to achieve work-life balance, you will always be satisfied, always be disappointed. You will never be satisfied. That doesn't exist.
Mm.
It doesn't exist. So that's why I say like the goal in my experience is to be in a constant state of balancing, is not to try to reach a place of work-life balance.
No, so there'll be like something
Right.
like, okay, like you said, a seasonal thing. Right now, I'm very much focused on my career. I'm very much, and my career is not my number one priority. So in saying that, then maybe I will not be going out all the time. When friends want to go out, or want to, hey, let's even go out for lunch or dinner. My weekends might be full of me doing more podcasts, and that's the season that I'm in at the moment. Okay, and then I notice, oh, maybe something's my relationships need a bit of a bit. I need to put more effort there. But at the moment, and maybe that would be considered wrong. I would, for that period of time, maybe I should have invested a bit more, not so much into my podcast. That's probably what I'm like looking at, in
See,
saying that to you.
I love going way out of balance. And this is going to sound strange. And I don't talk about this in the book, but going into this year, I knew I wanted to, like I had a business and it's a great business and I'm still somewhat involved. I'm kind of working my way out towards the tail end of this year. But I knew I wanted to write this book. This had been a passion of mine for many years. And I knew that 2020 was it. And I made that decision. And this was kind of my year to go out of balance, moving toward this new career in a very public way. Because before it was like referral only. I didn't have a website. It was very kind of this private coaching thing I did. And I knew that this year I wanted to break out a bit and go public with this and publish a book and start, promoting my online course, which I've had, but never really marketed seriously. So I gave myself permission Someone over the last week said something like, we are able to connect the dots looking back at some of the things that transpire, but when you live intentionally, you're able to connect the dots ahead of time. And I really appreciated this woman in the challenge saying that. She went live and said that. I'm like, oh, I love that. And she articulated a lot more beautifully than I just did for you, but that was the essence of what she was saying. So before this year began, I had made the decision to go out of balance this year. I knew it would take some sacrifice. I knew it would be hard with my kids. I knew it would be hard on my wife. She agreed. We kind of bought into this idea together that, yeah, we have something here that we both believe could help a lot of people. And we know you're not so fulfilled lately with this other business you're doing. 2020 is it. So I gave myself permission. So that's why I'm a little overweight. That's why I'm not like at in a 7 or 8 out of 10 with my kids. And, that's why I'm feeling a little disconnected from my wife. But we also made the decision and we knew what we were getting into. We set the expectation that this year might be a little out of balance the whole year. And then each quarter, we kind of work on course correcting a bit. So in the book, I talk about majors, minors, and electives. And I actually wrote about this example in the book. The major goal for me this year was to get this business off the ground, to get this book published and written. That was my major goal. I have 2 electives. One's a financial elective. 2 minor goals. One's a relationship goal with my wife. We just celebrated 10 years in September and finally got away for a weekend, which we hadn't done in 7 years. We need to do that more often, but we had a great weekend together. It was one of which was a relationship minor goal. Then I had a financial minor goal and said, you know what, if I can actually get this major goal figured out, it'll actually help both my relationship and my financial goal. But I still have all my electives. I still have my spirituality. I still have my mental and emotional health. I still have my physical health. I still have my kids and the relationship with them. I still have my aging parents. I still have my friends, my siblings, the communities, the networks, the memberships, associations that I'm involved with. I still have my charity. I still have all these other electives. I can't lose sight of those electives this year. I need to constantly pulse those and make sure that I'm keeping them going in the right direction so that they don't get too far off track this year. So I think it's okay to give yourself permission to say, you know what, for the next 90 days, or you know what, this week, I'm you now. You know what, this week, I'm going to have to sacrifice any communications with my friends and family because I have to do a jam session this week and get my podcast where I know it needs to go. And I got 7 days. And I might even email and text and tell everybody, look, I'm going to a black hole for the next week. I need to push because I'm not where I want to be this year or this quarter. I love doing that stuff because you get such hyper focus and you put deadlines on yourself. I'm someone who absolutely needs to work with a deadline. I need deadlines. I needed a deadline for this. I know we're going to do a cafe episode soon, which I'm really excited about. And weeks ago, you're like, we're going to do a cafe episode on this. I'm like, great. I'll put it, well, you know what this is because you're reading the book, but I'll put it in the parking lot area. And I won't actually revisit that until the week of. And sure enough, what did I prioritize and actually put on my schedule this morning? An hour block. And I just listened to that podcast. So it's fresh and it's relevant and we can do our cafe episode and have some fun with it.
Yeah.
But I didn't go off and get distracted with it 3 or 4 weeks ago when you first told me about it, right? I prioritized it at the right time in the right order. So it made sense to me.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself if you're, going out of bounds a little bit. You're aware of it. The awareness is key. I think it was Abraham Maslow, the great American psychologist, who said that in order for someone to change, they need to have awareness of themselves, right? And I'm paraphrasing. That's not the exact quote. But awareness is such a powerful thing for us to all have. So you either make a decision. Do I want to course correct and rebalance, reallocate a bit? Or am I comfortable with this imbalance? And do I want to keep moving for another day, keep moving for another week, keep moving for another month? And if you get to the point where you're living so proactively, which is you're not there yet, but you'll see that in a coming chapter. when you get to the point you're living so proactively, you give yourself permission, and you might even okay it with the other people in your life that it might affect. Hey, I'm going to be a little distanced this quarter. Or, hey, this month, how we go to breakfast every 2 weeks, or how we meet for a coffee every week? Just for the next 30 days, I'm going to have to push and postpone doing these things. I'm involved.
I like that.
Yeah.
I
So
like
you get
that.
permission.
Just telling them, giving them a heads up. You don't have to ghost people. Just say, hey, look, right now I'm really focused on this, and I'm really excited about it. I really want to spend my focus and my time on it. And so we'll have to let's do something in a month. Give me a month to just really focus on what I'm doing. I really like that. I think people probably don't do that enough or feel guilty in doing that. And I think maybe sometimes friends are a bit more understanding about that. But when it comes to family, it's a bit hard. It's like, hey, if I call you, I want you to be there. You need to show up. And I understand that part too. I think because I'm somebody who, when a friend is in or something, and I know someone's told me about something that they're struggling with or having a problem or whatever, and I like being that friend that shows up. And I like, if something's going on, and so if I'm having my thing going on and I've told them, hey, if something's wrong or you need to talk, just call me whenever.
Sure.
That's the part, where you try. It's more the relationships. I think keeping all the other electives, like my spiritual, my meditation, my health, my like emotional intelligence. I like to try and educate myself on that, and mental intelligence, and other things that are going well in my life. Okay, that's all one thing. But then I think relationships, and then because it's involving other people, most of this other stuff just involves me.
Right.
Because this is relationships and involves other people, that's where it's like, oh, like I do you know what I'm saying? I promised my time, or allowed myself to be available to these people if they're in time of need, and it's like, oh, I really just want to focus on my own thing. That's the part where I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, was that wrong? Is that wrong for me to do, to just take my own time? I like to be that friend that shows up.
Sure. So let me ask you this then, because I'm with you and I get that. I've somewhat changed my tune about this thing that you're speaking of over the last few years. But if your life is a hot mess, if your life is chaotic, if you're not taking care of number one, if you're stressed that your podcast, you're behind and you're not where it needs to be. Like if you're in that position of survival is what I would call that. You're in survival mode. Mm-hmm. And friends reach out and ask you to borrow your brain, borrow your time. Can you help me? Can you meet me? Are you in a position to meet with them, be present with them physically and mentally and everything else, and serve them at your highest level? Or would you be in a much better position if you took care of number one first and you knew all your ducks in a row, you were stress-free, you were confident, you had everything that you needed to have organized, prioritized, and you were hitting your marks, and then you go out and then you meet with them and then you serve them?
Absolutely, you're right. No, I would obviously be better in spending that time with myself. But I think for me anyway, and I think maybe for you too, but other people's, like when you're really excited and it is going really well, like, right now my podcast is going real, and like I am just getting excited because I'm connecting with more people and everything's flowing, everything's going fantastic. But because it's going so well, I want to spend some more time in it. And that's where I'm like, everything's so exciting about this. My conversation's so enriching and fulfilling and meaningful for me. And for me, that is incredible. Like it warms and fills my insights and everything, and I would sometimes would rather sit down and do what I'm doing with you right now and have a conversation and dive deep in a question than just going out with a friend and talking about really, maybe I'm there showing
surface
up
level.
for surface level, or even just not so surface level, but maybe being there for them, but maybe listening to something that I've heard before many times, or it's, do you know what I mean? And
yeah, I know what you mean.
But they need me, but they're like, not need me. Like if they need sometimes something, they need someone there. And I decided I would be that person that shows up. So
Yeah.
that's where the struggle is. When it's just,
Yeah.
oh no, I've got a real low, guys. No, I'm not feeling good. That's easy. But when you're really excited about something, it's going so well, you don't want to spend time on anything else.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I get that. I have people in my life who are broken records, right? And you connect with them and they vent about the same broken record every time. And I I think for me, I look at it this way: those people are struggling. They need a set of ears to hear them out, and they feel better after they vent. And I need to be cautious because I can't fill up my schedule with those types of conversations. They really drain me. So I have to be careful of that because I can go nuts from that. I can go insane from that. I have people in my life, just like what you're saying, who fill me up. I get into those flow states and my gosh, I could do this for 8 hours with, I could do this for days upon days with no food and no sleep because I'm so juiced up. I'm so charged to be with these people. But then I have people over here who are the exact opposite. You've got energy, you've got your energy producers and you've got your energy drainers or takers. I think that's normal. And I think, again, to have the awareness for that is good. And I also think you need to be protective of your time. And you need to decide, well, how much time am I going to invest in a typical day or week with the people who are my friends or with the people who are my family? They're my friends. They're my family. They don't fill me up like some of this other stuff, but I still feel like I should have an obligation to them. And so what are your rules? Do you create your rules? So do you spend 2% of your week or your day, catering to them? Do you spend 10? Do you spend 20? If you spent 50, you're going to drain. You're not going to be having a lot of fun in life if you're spending half your time with people who absolutely drain your energy. So I think it's good to have awareness. And I think it's good to say, yeah, I can probably allocate X amount of my time, my week, my day, my month, whatever it is. But it's hard. That's not easy because I have everyone, all of us have those types of people in our lives. And a lot of those types of people happen to be people in our family, I would imagine. Right. And they're probably saying the same thing about me. They're like, I can't believe Sean doesn't care about the weather. All I want to do is stay on the surface and talk about how the weather was today, and it's like, I don't care. It's like, I don't care about the weather, or I can't believe Sean doesn't care about football. I have friends who are, invest in 3 to 6 hours every Sunday. They watch football. Cool. Yeah. I used to do that too. I'm not so much into it at this stage in life. Maybe I'll pick it up. Maybe I'll get back into football in a few years. But right now I'm not in a place.
Yeah.
But like I connect with them and that's all they whine about is how poorly their team's doing or the coach or this or that. And I'm like, cool. I mean, that's neat. I'm just not into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, exactly. Like knowing that. And, when you're coming into balance, I think the things that can kind of stay up are the things that you're doing just with yourself in more of a way, and knowing what is your priority. But like we said, with relationships, I think that's the hardest thing that kind of spins. And like, if it affects me, or affects you, if it affects us, like, we need to be aware of how much time or percentage, or as you're saying, that we're giving to others that will put us out of balance within ourselves. Like a puzzle, like I said, it's an energy thing. You just said you feel energy drained. So it's like, oh, that energy decrease of lower frequency affects the rest of the aspects of the elective subjects that we talk about.
Look at how into this you're getting. You're like smacking your microphone.
I know, the microphone just went out of nowhere, because I get it. I get so into this. Yeah.
When a minute ago, you said when you're coming out of balance. I think you meant to say when you're balancing.
Yeah, again, when you're balancing.
Balancing is just
that's right. Not when you're coming out of balance, but when there's like when something's kind of out of in maybe your mind, it's kind of lower than where you want it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, what's really neat is like, so you've got people, you've got energy gain and energy drain, right? You got those two sides. This is horrible, but years ago, like probably 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, I was running around with an interesting crowd. I was definitely the sum average of my 5 peers, as Jim Rohn would share. And I did a little bit of an exercise where I'm like, let me just look at all the people I surround myself with more of the time. So while all of us have, hundreds of connections and friends and associations and all that, like, let me look at the top 24, top 36 people between friends, family. Like, these are people I connect with regularly. And I was like, wow, for the most part, 98% of these people actually drain me. So I might need to reevaluate my relationships. I might need to get involved with different kinds of groups and communities. And I'm not suggesting you drop the people who drain you. You do what you need to do, but that was never my approach. My approach was just limiting my exposure and protecting my time maybe a little bit more now that I was aware, now that I had this new conscious realization of it. But what's amazing is, especially right now, I think, how many of us value community and how many of us value like-minded people who are looking to go after, advance in the same direction of the same dreams, people who are struggling or have been struggling with same things we struggle with. I'm having such an awesome time. Like, I have a mastermind and I have accountability partners. I have 2 people in my life who we meet with every 2 weeks for 90 minutes. We have this cadence, and it's like, we laugh. It's like, this is brain sex. Like, that's what this feels like.
Yes.
And like, we have to be really careful because we could sit here for 4 hours and blow our entire schedule this morning at breakfast if we're not careful. But I think we all need more awareness, because so often, especially with me, like with intentional living, I'm like, I think I'm like the only one on earth who cares about this stuff. I think I'm like the only person on earth who woke up a little bit, shifted out of going through the motions, and really wants to make my life matter and really wants to live a life of significance and meaning and purpose. And I thought I was like isolated, like this oddball. Am I the only one who thinks about, looking back on my life and being grateful and being fulfilled and being satisfied, versus having these regrets and all that? And the more I share, the more I open up, and now I have a book published and I have these programs. It's like, no, there are so many other people who are shifting too. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychoanalyst, talked about how we move from the morning into the afternoon, into the evening of our lives. And the program of life's morning will not support us in the afternoon. And so for me, it's like, I need to write it. I need to draft a new template for my life now that I'm in the afternoon. That's where I feel I am. Like, I can't keep living conventionally. I can't keep living this template that was just shown to me, and I just followed it. I can't do that any longer. It doesn't support me. It doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't fill me up now that I'm in the afternoon of my life. So it's fantastic when people, when I connect with someone like you, and when we connect with someone like Ryan, who referred us together.
Yes.
It's like birds of a feather flock together, whether you're into fly fishing, sewing, knitting, it doesn't matter. No. Personal growth, intentional living, podcasting, helping others, serving, contributing. It doesn't matter. I think it's so important for us to identify, accept what we're interested in. I'm into this stuff. These are my passions.
And not people around me not necessarily will be so. But there are others that are, which I'm meeting, like yourself and all these other people that I'm connecting with through the podcast around the world. And it's incredible, and it's crazy, and it's incredible. And I want to spend more time doing it. And I shouldn't feel guilty, and we shouldn't feel guilty by spending time. Like you said, if this is what you want to dedicate your time to right now in this season, dedicate your time to it. And it shouldn't be a guilt thing.
Correct.
And there's
correct. And what's awesome is, like, if you're proactive about it and you ahead of time give notice. Like I remember, I thought I had this many years ago, I had in one of my first businesses. No, my first business went bankrupt. So this is probably like my second business. I had this service model, and it was a very one-to-one client type of relationship. I was basically consulting. And I remember that I would feel so guilty when I would travel. I would take like a vacation, and my wife, we were just married, and she's like, can't you just put an auto response? I'm like, no, people need me. I'm so important that if I'm needed on a Saturday, I got to go take the call. Like, I'm just such an important guy. And I finally came to terms with like, you know what? Yes, I'm putting the autoresponder up. Yes, I'm going to check out and be present with my wife when we travel. And yes, I'm even going to go as far as emailing them like on Wednesday or Thursday ahead of time before I take this vacation that I'm out of town. I have to put them on notice. And I did that. And everyone wrote me back. It's like, awesome. Good for you. It's about time. Enjoy.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
fine. We don't need you. And it's like, oh, I'm not very important, but I was important to my wife.
Yeah.
And that's where I needed to be physically and mentally present.
Yeah.
So if you're proactive about it, like you said, that guilt thing is real. So like you said, if you proactively say, hey, love you, and I'm going to be a little bit out of touch the next month because I've got something real here. I've got something that fills me up. I'm doing this podcast thing. I got a lot of work to do. And I think I can take this to the next level in like the next 30 days. So just so you know, I may not be as in communication as I normally am. They get back to you. They're like, yeah, Tiffany, go, go, go. That's awesome. Thanks for the heads up. And all of a sudden you get to take action. You're mobilized in a guilt-free way. Your results without that negative energy, without that guilt anchoring you down, your results now, you're free, you're liberated. That's such an awesome thing.
Absolutely.
That's such an awesome thing. Because like if you take action from a place of liberation and passion and creativity versus like when you're taking action, you're sitting here upstairs in your mind thinking like, oh man, I just feel so bad and guilty that I'm not talking to these people. I wonder how they're doing. And oh my gosh, they're probably thinking, where the hell's Tiffany?
Yeah.
You're going to get so much better results.
Kind of
yeah. She doesn't care about me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to tell you, but you're probably not that important. That's what I found out about me.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's living their lives.
They are.
No one's thinking a little Sean over here. Like everyone's doing their thing, living their life. And they probably really appreciate the fact that you're one of those people in their life that actually takes the time to reach out and say, thinking of you, hope you're well. And sometimes that's all it takes. It doesn't take a 90-minute coffee. It doesn't take a 45-minute phone call. Sometimes all it takes is, hey, for whatever reason, I'm thinking of you this morning. Just wanted to shoot you a quick text and let you know that I'm thinking of you and I hope you're well. Like I do that with my wife. I need to do it more often, but I do that every once in a while with my wife and it's awesome. She really appreciates that. Just anyone knowing that someone else is thinking of them.
Yeah.
So sure. Maybe it doesn't take this big thing, this big event, this big get together. Maybe it's just a quick, 2-3 line text. That's it.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sean. This is really been an interesting conversation. I didn't know where it was going to go because the question is just like, wait, well, this question, I'm just trying to think with it. It was a bit too, but as we're having this conversation, I love to ask the guest speakers at the end. It's like, well, having this conversation and speaking out loud about certain things, what has it highlighted to you or made you reflect about something?
I think when you ask the question, what if my whole life has been wrong? And well, what does wrong mean? I never thought about that because I was always thinking when I read that autobiographically, I was like, well, what does it mean in my life? What if my whole life has been like, how is my life wrong? And how do I define wrong? Maybe there's no such thing as right or wrong. It's that crazy dichotomy in spirituality that we talk about. There's, the only thing is one, so like, how do I process this question in my own life? I think that's great. I love that question. It caught me because I'm like, oh, I don't know what's wrong for anyone else. That's up to them. So that kind of stuck out to me because my whole approach is I'm not the expert. It's your job to be the expert in your life. What the heck do I know? Maybe I can take you down a line of questioning to help you get clarity and get the answers you seek. But you need to find those for yourself at the end of the day. We all need to take charge. Like my dad told me, no one is responsible for you but you. And for me, I'm like, I don't like that responsibility word. That whole thing. I don't like that. But if I could reframe that and say, take charge of my life. Yeah, I can get on board that train. I like that. I want to take charge. And feel like I'm in more control. So that to me stands out about the conversation we just had. It's like, well, what does that mean? Your life is wrong. Like who gets to decide what wrong means and how does that play out in your life? And it's a great question. And I think it's good for all of us to say, well, how is my life wrong right now? And is anything wrong? Maybe it's all fine and things happen for a reason and who knows? But it's a neat question to ask yourself. And I think you could really take some time and meditate or contemplate on that one for a little while.
Absolutely. Sit there pondering on it. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Sean. Where can people find you?
Thank you so much. So people can find me at my website, www.seanrosensteel.com. I won't take the time to spell that. Hopefully you can put it in the show notes. But I'm currently giving away a personalized signed copy of my book. All you have to do is pay shipping and handling, and we'll get that out. I run these 5-day intentional living challenges. They're awesome. People go nuts in these challenges, and there's really cool transformation that takes place in just 5 days. So I run those every month. You'll see some information about that. And SeanRosensteel.com. And I'm also on Amazon. If people use Amazon, you can grab the book there, but it won't be signed. It won't be signed.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Get to Know You. If you enjoyed this podcast, rate, review, and share the podcast on